This is Open Parameter Podcast, conversations about the intersection of life and art with artists from around the world. Come chat with us on our Discord server and get monthly early access to episodes by becoming a supporting member today at patreon.com/openparameter. Welcome back to Open Parameter Podcast, Del Cook speaking. I'm joined today by two very accomplished dancers, Ingrid Kapteyn and Lindsay Harwell. Together with their friend Jason Collins, they are HEWMAN, HEWMAN, a collaborative collective that reimagines the traditional model of a dance company by engaging individual artists to collaborate as equals in the creative process. HEWMAN have self-produced 3 evening-length installations in unconventional venues across New York City, including a Midtown tenement, a Harlem gallery, and a Williamsburg garage, to name a few. They are now exploring the translation of their work from open, immersive settings to the stage. Ingrid, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining me today. I've been really looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you for having us.
Finding us.
I want accomplished dancer written over my bed.
on your bedspread, accomplished dancer.
Yes, just so I can look at it every night.
I couldn't think of another way to describe you. I mean, I looked at both of your biographies, and I was like, wow, like, Ingrid, Metropolitan Opera, and all of the different groups that you've collaborated with. I mean, accomplished is absolutely a word I would use to describe the two of you, or the three of you, including Jason. So I promised in the email, as we were talking over the last month, getting ready for this, that I would tell the story of how I found out about you guys, and I was telling Ingrid, I wasn't sure. I hope that the story lives up to its expectations, but it's really, I was not doing anything related to Open Parameter at all. I was actually just, okay, this is kind of weird. So, long story short,
I can't stand the suspense.
I know. I'm sorry. Long story short, my mother, a friend of hers, got hacked on Facebook. And I know a little bit about computers, and so I was trying to figure out, like, is this guy actually a hacker? He was like trying to do a phishing scan over the email, over Facebook message. Turns out he had spoofed an Instagram account and hooked it up to the person's Facebook account. And then so I was looking up the fake email that he used. So I was just Googling the fake email and like trying to find, and for some reason, as I was going through the pages of Google, this thing popped up that said HEWMAN Collective. And I'm like, what's that? And I look it up, and it was your website. And I was like, okay, like, save this for later. These are guys that I could definitely talk to and interview. And then I sent you an email, and so here we are. But that's how I discovered you.
So basically what you're telling me is that we got caught.
I guess you can think of it that way, yeah.
Oh no.
That could not be more unexpected.
Yeah.
The incestuous network that is performing artists, it was a hacker that brought us together.
I know, right? Yeah, someone who lives overseas and has no connection to anything. Yeah, I know.
Weird.
Who knows? Hey, I mean, it was quite a serendipitous experience. So I was glad it happened.
Wow.
And here we are.
Yeah.
I guess con artists are artists too. Everybody's included.
See, now that's what I want written over my bed. It's just con artists are artists too. So I intentionally didn't mention this in the introduction because I wanted to leave it to you. But how did the three of you meet? Ingrid, Lindsay, and Jason.
Lindsay, take it away.
Oh, you want me to go for it? Okay. Well, we all went to Juilliard together, all graduated the same year, all in dance. So we spent 4 years together every day in the same hallway, in the same dance studios, working on the same pieces together. So we got to know each other very fast and very intensely. Yeah.
That's for sure. There were only 24 people in our class, so the intimacy was at a high level from the beginning. But actually, we didn't work together as a unit closely until the spring of our 4th and last year.
Mm-hmm.
when Jason cast Lindsay and me in his senior project.
Oh, wow.
And there were other people in the piece, but there's one day when we were just working, the three of us, on a duet between Lindsay and me. And Lindsay and I'd been in a lot of pieces that Lindsay made over the years. And we each had relationships like with the others as one-on-one, but as
Yeah.
three, we felt a synergy that day that we could not forget.
Yeah.
So something started that we kept feeling and kept talking about until the first winter of the year after we graduated. We had all gone away from school and were working for a lot of other people and craving that feeling of making our own work and being the ones to call the shots. And because we were all feeling that independently and expressing it to each other independently, we eventually realized we could come together and do something about it.
That's really cool. Yeah, I learned I had the same experience in undergrad. You know, whenever I felt that synergy with a particular collaborator, I'm like, all right, I gotta hold on to them. And now some of them are working with me on the open parameter projects, so that's really cool. Is there a culture of interdisciplinary collaboration at Juilliard?
They tried, at least. I don't know how it is now, but every year the third years would choreograph a piece on the second and first year dancers, and what was it called? Choreo comp, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, called choreo comp. And basically a choreographer would pair up with a musician, and that would write an original score for the piece that they would create. So like every year there would be this concert where all these new pieces would be performed with new music done by the artists. So I guess that's the most we ever really did interdisciplinary, but they at least like tried to have it in there somewhere.
Yeah, remember colloquium? Our first year, there was one class that met once a week for all the freshmen. That was really the only place where you met students from other disciplines, from other divisions of the school, which include jazz and vocal arts and historical performance, drama, all the divisions. And the gears were turned and oiled for us crossing paths and crossing our work. But the overwhelm of first year, plus the idea that it was school, always made the collaboration feel like an assignment to me. And that's just me. That's personal, that I was sort of weighted down by the feeling of responsibility of working together. So it wasn't until after school that I really discovered how joyful creation can be in the company of people that you choose and people that you love and people that you understand.
Yeah. And also it was kind of like we were given that like taste of collaboration early on, but you come in, you're like hyper focused on your division, and they also kind of make you believe that like you're here for dance and only dance, like focus on dance, like don't do other stuff really. So you have that mentality with like other teachers trying to build this collaboration with the other divisions, but the overarching theme of the dance division, and I think all of them, was just like, you're here for dance, that's what you focus on. Because like that colloquium class, like I think like half those people I never saw again, just because we were all trapped in our different like parts of the school.
So, like, you only have so much bandwidth when you're in the dance hallway from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m.
every day.
That's I was smiling because that sounds exactly like the experience that I had in undergrad. And I'm in Texas. You know, I went to the Meadow School at SMU.
Okay.
And and you've just described the experience exactly. We had a class that was called FACE. I can't remember what that stood for. Yeah, I can't remember what that stood for, but it was essentially colloquium, and it was the same thing where everyone was there, but the collaboration felt forced,
Mhm.
and it wasn't. It was like, you guys should collaborate, you know, and it's like, and I don't like to be too much of a critic of my undergrad, because I did have really good experiences there, but there is this situation of like, they like to tout that there's a lot of creativity, but it's really just compartmentalism.
Mm.
And the faculty members are, I don't want to say tyrannical, but well, some of them are, but you know, they're really like, you know, you students are here for our purposes, and you know, like, you're here to do this thing, you're really here to be specialists. And that's the problem, right? Wouldn't you agree that like a lot of university programs for arts seem to generate specialists in a
Mhm.
world that does not value specialists, and really you can't survive as a specialist in the arts, wouldn't you agree? At least not in America.
Yeah. Yeah, because Juilliard we were kind of built to be dancers in Europe. Like that's what their goal for us
Really?
was for us to, yeah, for us to audition overseas and get jobs overseas.
Hmm.
Um, which,
That's weird.
uh, well, it was like our director at the time, he was a huge proprietor for MDT.
Hmm.
So NDT was like his favorite company. That's like all he would talk about, and his favorite students were the people that got into NDT. So it was like this weird, like, holy grail of a company that we were supposed to like try to attain specifically. And it was an unsaid type of thing. Like if you didn't go overseas, you like failed almost. I wouldn't, maybe that's too harsh, but it's like this idea that our success was based on like if we got in a company overseas. Like that was the whole like purpose for Juilliard for those 4 years, to build us, to like send us out. Yeah. And so no one told us about like New York dance or American dance really, except for like the classics like Martha Graham or
Hmm.
Paul Taylor, and that's about it.
Merce Cunningham.
Merce Cunningham, but by
Yeah.
then his company had folded
Yeah.
by the time we graduated, so that wasn't even an option for. And that's funny because me and Ingrid and Jason's class specifically, we were like the Cunningham class or like
Yeah.
the modern class, so it was weird to have like our specialties not be super accessible to us once we graduated.
There's a reason they're called conservatories, because those older people from older generations and older worlds who are passing on the old information, they want us to succeed. And in Europe, the government sponsors dance companies, underwrites dance companies, and dance companies have full-time, year-round contracts with benefits. So of course they want that level of security for their students, but they are conserving old worlds that don't necessarily exist anymore, especially in the States. And
Mhm.
what I find ironic is that the creative people that I've ever known, are the kind of people who, like you're saying, Del, you wear every hat under the performing arts umbrella and outside of it that I've ever heard of, because the creative juices make you versatile and make you curious. And so becoming a specialist doesn't really fit with that, except that you are really focused and you practice a lot of things really hard for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all wearing more hats than we did in school. That's for sure.
I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with that. But speaking to what you said about the old notions kind of refusing to die, like, I've said it on the show before, but that absolutely extends to the classical musical realm.
Oh, I'm sure. Maybe even worse.
It's worse. Well, I'm biased, but it's pretty bad. And you know, I try not to make open parameter my private war on it, but it kind of is. And you know, hopefully that doesn't get me squashed by some of the, what I like to call, the megacore fine arts groups. But we'll see. You know, please don't hurt me, Symphony. Anyway, but Yeah, I mean, my next question is a good segue into this. Is you know, I was going to ask, what was the inception of Human? What drove you to form your own collective? And I mean, I can kind of imagine what drove you to form your own collective, but what drove you to form your own collective?
I I mean, for me, there's never like a moment where like I was like, oh, let's make our own company. It was more like all of us were having this urge to create, like Ingrid said, and we all just got together and decided like, oh, we want to create together. We all work together well. Let's just make something and see where it goes. But then as we like got into the studio and we talked about like what we are interested in creating, that's kind of how the idea of human uh, got started. Like we had, I'm trying to remember like the first idea that kind of popped in. Was it humans within structure? Just like that
Yeah.
idea. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, this idea of like humans within structure, where people in New York City, every place we go, we're just putting ourselves in a different box in a different scenario, and that idea of just like different people in different situations and what that means and how none of it's really different. We're all just humans within structure. Like it's just a simple phrase and it is real and it's true. And how do we take that and build something? And then like that, the word human got really attached to us. So then we're like, okay, we want to like name ourselves. So what do we name ourselves? And then like, how do we like change human to make it sound something or like manipulate it? And then I think it was Ingrid that had the idea of like HEW, which is it's the technique where you build statue or like crack marble into a statue, right, Ingrid, or something like
Yeah.
that. Mm-hmm.
What a sculptor does to stone.
Yeah, you hew it. So then, and I was like, oh, perfect. We're building humans within spaces, so it like all made sense to us. And then, like probably in some random New York coffee shop, human was born.
Totally. All the cafes that plot our history.
Mm-hmm.
I would add that, as you know, I'm sure, Del, as soon as you start a project, the ball forms and then it starts rolling down the hill. And from that moment on, you're just chasing after it, running after it, and it's telling you what you need to do.
Yeah.
And that definitely happened at the beginning of Human, where it makes all the decisions and we follow its instructions, that rolling down the hill ball. And the seed, as Lindsay has said, conceptually, that really gave us fuel and inspiration is that in the world we came out of school and the world we were looking around at, so often an audience member could go to the theater and see a dance performance from rows and rows back in the darkness and feel like the dancers weren't even human. Like at a certain point, they're doing stuff that seems so otherworldly and impossible that the experience of watching doesn't feel like one of connection. It almost feels like one of exclusion. Mm-hmm. And Human, we wanted to put the human on the pedestal. We wanted to put people in spaces where both the performers and the viewers would recognize their similarities more than their differences and realize that we were all human bodies in structures, not just the dancers, not just the audience.
Yeah.
So that little seed has stuck with us since then.
The idea of inclusion and community within the space, within a performance space.
Yeah. That definitely seems to factor in with your, I mean, audience participation and involvement seems to be a huge part of your work. How do you, when you're doing that, when you get that close to an audience, because kind of to put what you said, Ingrid, in a different to say it a different way, like I've always envisioned it that, you know, there's the stage and there's the house, and then there's this invisible fourth wall. And if you break that fourth wall, or if an audience member intrudes into that space, or vice versa, that's a grave mistake, or that the universe is going to collapse in on itself if you do that. And I was watching your the video about Humans with Structure, your debut performance, and at one point one of you gives an audience member a hug. I mean, that's like not even breaking the fourth wall. That's just like, imagining it's not there, And so how do you gauge consent from the audience when you're getting that close to them?
Oh God, it changes because it's a part of the performance we have no control over, nor do we know what we're gonna get.
Yeah.
So we tried to build those moments of interaction so loosely, or like so tentatively, that like we can gauge, like, is this person comfortable with this? If they're not, we can kind of adjust and find someone else. I mean, luckily in that first show, because I'm the person that gave the hug, I usually picked people that I knew, so they'd be like, okay, like it'll be fine. But then once we kind of got more comfortable with it, I started hugging other people I didn't know, and usually people were very receptive, and they like really wanted it, like they wanted to be a part of it, and like their energy kind of shot out into the space to like be willing. Because usually you can tell the people that are like, do not come near me, do not touch me, I'm just here to watch, and the people that were like actively engaged. And both are fine. I'm not like, if I was in a immersive show, I wouldn't always want to be like singled out, but you kind of just have to read the room and like read the people, and it changed every night, and every person was different, so you just kind of had to like in the moment just decide what you were going to do with it.
Yeah, consent is such an important word right now. And the thing about dance is that it's body language. And the thing about live performance is that it's an energy exchange, which we are desperate for all the more after this year. But everything that we do when we put ourselves in a space with audience members moving around us, like it's like they're at a museum exhibit, except the art is moving and the art is us, so we're all intermingled. Everything we do depends on what they do. It's not that we have a plan and we're going to do it no matter what. It's that we have ideas of what we want to share and where we want to go, but we're only going to do it when we have read the energy of the audience around us, either as a group or as individuals, and engaged what is safe and not. And
because if a person doesn't want to do something, they usually like tell you no, which has happened to us. Like we've gone up to people and they've just like shook their head and like waved their arms in front of them, and we're just like, please don't. So then you're like, okay, you don't want to, I'll move to the next person. So yeah, it's really just reading the energy of the room, and kind of it's like a guess. Like you choose a person and you hope that they respond in the way you would like, and they don't always. So then you just gotta work with whatever is presented to you.
How do you do that? How do you convey to them the message of, oh, okay, you don't want me in your personal space, I'll move on to someone else, without kind of breaking the mood or the tone or the character that you might be in, and without making it seem in a, I don't know how to say this, without giving yourself the like verisimilitude of being a court jester, And I put it that way because I also, when I was an undergrad, I did a lot of performance art and live improv stuff. And there were times when normally in the performances that I was in, the lights were very dark. There was almost no light, and so they really couldn't see me. So it was a little more impersonal. But I would get up into the audience members' space and like climb over the chairs and drop down right in front of them and look at them, and but I always kind of saw it, at least the character I was in, was that I was sort of so maybe I'm just biased in that question, but how do you not break character when you're conveying that message of I understand, I'll leave you alone, you know.
I think we're not in character. I think,
Mhm.
I mean, Lindsay may have different words than I'm choosing, but part of putting humans on the pedestal and not sculptures is that we're being ourselves and we're not actually trying to be anything but ourselves. And that's a skill that we've had to practice and learn because it doesn't come automatically with performing. Somehow
Right.
there's an assumption with performing that you're going to become something else and you're not going to be yourself. But how do you, with all of your honesty and imperfection, step into the room and just do choreography in a way that is you? So then when you come up when you come up to a person in the audience, you don't have to change anything. You're already you and they're already them. And your interaction is the way it would be if you were on the sidewalk, just usually with no speaking.
Right.
To add on to that, from what we've learned is like we build the space from the beginning. So the moment you walk in, we hopefully have already set it up so like nothing really changes the atmosphere. There's no like, oh, we're starting. Like the environment should stay the same. I mean, there is a moment where like, oh, the piece is starting, but like the way the room feels and the way you interact with others doesn't really change. And that hopefully like sets it up so that everyone is on the same playing field. There's like no shock value, which I think comes from that more court gesture approach. Like you're trying to instill a reaction, whereas we take the reaction that we get, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so it's like
does.
we present them with something, we see how they react to it. We're not expecting a certain outcome. So it's like whatever that outcome is, we take that and then move forward, depending. If that person is like wants to be a part of it, or if they don't, then you just, like I said, you move on, you find another person. And usually the way we've set those moments up in the past is usually your eye can watch multiple things. So like I would be going to do the hug, but Jason and Ingrid would be over on the other side doing something else to kind of keep the space active. So it's not like everyone tunnel visioned onto this is how we do it. So it's not like the person isn't being like caught out. But we have done that too. So I guess it just depends on what type of situation we want to create and how we want to make them feel.
Obviously, in this new world dominated by a deadly virus that prohibits us from being as close as you guys normally are able to be in your performances, how has that affected what you're able to do, what you want to do, or what you're able to do with your dance choreography?
Well, COVID kind of I mean, HEWMAN has kind of taken a very long hiatus since COVID hit. Because right before, we had a show planned for that May. We had dates. We were ready to finish like the piece we had been working for 3 years to complete. And then we just kind of had to let it go, just like drop it, because all of it was out of our control. And we don't know what exactly we're going to do once like performance spaces open up again. We don't know if we're going to go back to that piece or we're just going to let it go because it's from a time in the past and maybe it's time to develop something new with all the new information that we have gained from COVID. Because for all of us, it's been a very enlightening year and it's changed all of our viewpoints on the world and on our art and on many things. So it's like, how do we take this new insight and move forward? Which we haven't discussed yet, but there's a lot we have to unpack before we know where we're going to take HEWMAN and for the future.
Yeah, the future is unwritten. We're going to listen to it before we tell it anything. It's been existential to the amount of letting go we've all done to the world as we know it, as the rug pulled out from under us. And we've all needed to focus our energy on coping in our individual ways, I think. And that has involved dancing to a different degree for each of us, to different degrees in our own living rooms and our own minds. So there will be a coming together when the coast is clear, but we don't have many answers for you on that right now. And I think, how do I say, lots of intrepid, innovative dance makers and artists of all kinds like you have been figuring out how to open up possibilities in virtual spaces, which is incredibly admirable and not a direction we have had the drive to go in, because as you've heard, everything we're saying is based on human to human interaction. And having faith in the return of that is really important to me, and cultivating patience for the return of that. Of course, we're all adapting however we can, and we'll find our way back however we can. But that's what I can say for the time being.
Yeah. It's also our identities as dancers. Like, at least for myself personally, I had to take myself out of this idea that I am a dancer, that like we've been built up the majority of our lives as like, you are a dancer, you are an artist, that's like what you are, and that's what you have to focus on. So in a year of time that we didn't have to focus on that, it was like, okay, who am I without it? And how do I make that more important? Because the thing that we've built our lives around just got taken away from us like instantly. So yeah, my viewpoints on dance, I would say, are very different nowadays, or at least how I want to put myself in it and how I want to move it forward. And I think that's the same with a lot of people, a lot of dancers specifically. Like to be frank, a lot of people I've talked to are like, yeah, fuck dance. Like, why did we like do that to ourselves? So and I agree, because we would let people take advantage of us. We would work for nothing. We would do all of these things just because we were told to, like, you have to do that. And it's like, not really. We don't have to do any of that if we don't want to. And it kind of, COVID gave at least me the freedom to be like, I don't have to break my back for this. I don't have to put my own like mental stability in jeopardy just because I've been forced to believe that dance is my only meaning in life.
Yeah, a really big question that comes out of that for me is, there seems to be these two. Well, let me back up. When the culture that I come from as a musician, that I was taught, that both my parents are musicians, they've always taught me this. All of my professors in college always taught me this: is you never play. And the culture down here, in this community of musicians, is you don't play for exposure. You never play for exposure. That's bullshit. Like you can't cash exposure at the bank. And the people, the businessmen and the restaurant owners and the ensemble directors who say, oh, well, I can't pay you, but it'll be really good exposure for you. It's like, no, fuck off. Like, we're not, that's not that I like, oh, okay, bye, and that's always been the training that I received, was you never play. Now, charity is something else, like playing for an old folks home or at a hospital. That's charity. That's different. But we didn't study this craft for 18 years of our life or more, and really hone it to just play for exposure. That's really insulting. And so I set that up to ask, does that line up with, it doesn't sound like it, does that line up with what your training was? It sounds like you've had mentors in your lives tell you quite the opposite.
Hmm.
I wouldn't
Maybe.
say they told us the opposite, but I guess they just didn't really tell us anything.
Mm,
In regards to that, like what your worth is as a dancer. You were just kind of told like you have to be dancing.
wow.
Like that's where your worth was. Like you have to be dancing. Uh, so I with dance it's different because I feel like dance is so much or so easier to take advantage of, or people think it is, because people are just so dying to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so they're able to find like these people, usually younger performers, that are like, oh, we can't pay you, but like you'll be dancing, and sometimes that's enough to get people in. And like you said, most like for musicians, they would probably say no, fuck that. But like, and older dancers, we would be like, no, fuck that,
Yeah,
because
because you know better.
we know better, and
Yeah.
we've gone through it. Like I think Ingrid and I have both done things for exposure, quote unquote, and really has felt unfulfilling and just like, wow, that was just a kind of a waste of time. But then you learn from it, and you learn you like never want to do it again. And also, usually those people will treat you like crap anyway. So it's like you learn pretty fast. Like, yeah, we're not gonna accept that. That's not an equal give and take scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, leaving school, you might think that you're about to learn how to say yes, yes, yes. But I think more than that, Lindsay and I, we've been next to each other, learning how to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And I still haven't quite learned that lesson, honestly. I don't think, but that's a powerful strength to have in this field, where you have to know your own value because other people may not.
Yeah.
I have to say, COVID, I've had a sort of different experience in COVID, because suddenly, obviously, dance, I have not been dancing because it's my job, or because it pays my rent, or because it's my career, or even at the end of the day because it brings pleasure. What I learned early on is that if I don't continue some kind of physical practice daily, I actually have temper tantrums. Like I become pretty unrecognizable to myself mentally if I don't do this thing that I've been doing my whole life. And now COVID gave me the opportunity to learn why. And it's for a different reason than I may have thought. I learned
Mm-hmm.
how much I need this, not for any practical, logistical reasons. And
Yeah.
and that's and that could change any day. Maybe that's just this year, but that's that's something that has kept me in motion truly almost every day, because I wouldn't have survived without it.
Yeah, it's sort of relieving to hear another artist from a different discipline say that, because I've experienced that, and I've experienced it maybe not as, or maybe I didn't realize I wasn't experiencing as violently as I was, but I get it. I also will have temper tantrums if I don't like practice. Because since sixth grade I've been practicing percussion. I've been moving my arms and making sound, and I was doing that all the time in undergrad, and composing. And then I got out of school and went in a very different direction professionally. I was studying composition and I've said this a lot on the show, but I was studying composition, percussion, and then I went a completely different direction and became a professional stage manager, which doesn't really involve much of that at all. You're watching other people do that thing that you did for a while, and that can feel a little weird, and what's even weirder is when the people who are doing it know you and know that you can not, know that you also have the ability to do what they do, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the people I was working with were of a much higher caliber than me, had been performing much longer than me. Some of them are my former mentors and teachers as well. But they knew that I could play, because they had taught me my whole life. And there was at least one instance where I actually did have to play a rehearsal for a group. I played like 3 notes, because they knew I could. They're like, dude, we're down a member. Like, you need to come on. And I'm like, you really can't do this. But they're like, no, we've cleared it with everyone. It's cool. And I'm like, okay, so I was in a rehearsal. So that felt kind of cool. But yeah, like sometimes even when I'm like editing audio for this podcast or working on a particular business side of this, I suddenly just like put my hands down on the table and I have to go to my rehearsal room and just like play my marimba. Or the worst thing is that both of my djembes, both of my hand drums, their heads are broken and I haven't gotten them replaced. And that's one of the things that I use to really like, and I haven't been able to do that in years. And so Ingrid, it's sort of relieving to hear that someone else has had this experience, because I totally feel that.
I have to tell you something I learned early in quarantine when I was taking a course on the body, that there are 3 methods that the body has chemically for processing stress, which presents in 3 different chemical versions. And the first stress chemical basically is broken down by moving the limbs, like moving the arms and legs actually is what moves that hormone out of the body. And the second stress chemical is broken down by shaking. So anything the body is doing that's got a little tremor in it. And the third stress chemical is broken down by touch. And if you put like touch between people, if you put touch and moving the limbs and shaking together, what is that but dancing, or very nearly practicing drums or playing the drums? I feel like similar mechanics at work. So there you have it.
Yeah, and now we live in a world of everyone is living incredibly sedentary lives, and they're sitting at computers. Some of us are working from home. I basically just work from home. This whole project is started about remote connection, and
we're more stressed than ever.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the moments that we're able to, it's not lost on me what is driving the people in Florida and the people around the country who just can't stand it anymore and are just going out to the beach and getting in large crowds without masks and just going crazy. And then unfortunately the result of that is that, we have another surge. And I kind of saw that from the beginning. I was like, all right, Del, you're going to have to develop a sort of zen for yourself, and we're all going to have to develop a collective zen, because this virus wants us to get together and be humans, and that's what's going to kill us. And I don't want to get into like areas of like Darwinism, but I thought, okay, being able to ignore this like animalistic urge, or the natural body's natural, as you described, Ingrid, ability to reduce stress in the ways that you described, like being able to ignore that in order to save ourselves from COVID is like an adaptation of itself. I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but I think you know where I'm going there. And yeah, it sucks. It's just, and like for artists whose like you two, whose art is almost purely kinetic, it must be absolute, it just must be like a private hell some days.
Yeah. And then as you cower under the weight of the psychological drama going on when your career dissolves overnight, you hopefully remember out of the corner of your head that people's lives are at risk. And we're dealing with COVID virus and a racial virus that are eating the world alive. So how do we actually bring some proportion to our worries about our jobs and be patient?
Yeah.
Yeah, that goes back to something I've mentioned on the show too. Is a well-known opera composer once said, not to me, but in a room that I was present, he said, he's like, I hear a lot of people, a lot of students, they say, oh, composition is so hard. Composing is so hard. And he said, newsflash, no, it's not. It's not hard. Being a Syrian migrant is hard.
Hmm.
I heard this when I was like a sophomore in college, and when I heard him say that, I was like, oh wow, that was really impactful to me. And I've been kind of thankful to him. Um, I would like to say who it is, but I don't want to in case he would prefer I not say that. Um, but I've always been thankful to that particular individual for putting that idea in my head and putting the whole art into perspective for me at such an early age. But you're right. You're absolutely right that we all have to um, be conscious of what our role is in society, I guess, and but not just stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Find a new way to do
Yeah,
what we
you
can.
you have to find a new relationship to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about your. That was a great conversation. First, I just have to say that was fantastic to talk to you guys about that exact subject. But I'd like to jump back to talking about, I guess, before the pandemic. You describe your collective as an organization that um, reimagines the dance collective as you don't really have like one choreographer who's pulling all the strings. And often a lot of groups aspire um, a lot a lot of groups aspire to like authentically collaborate, but often end up with like a leader. So like, how do you navigate that? How do you choreograph a piece without having like one person calling all the shots?
Hmm.
I feel like that was the easiest thing for us to do because I think the what makes it easier to create something is not having all the pressure on you. So the fact that we could divvy up the pressure equally between the three of us, it kind of it gave us room for each of us to explore what we wanted to explore, but also not putting the weight on like this whole thing is depends on you. So yeah, it was a conversation. Like, what are we interested in? What do we want to try to attain? Uh, and how do we want to get there? So if we had vastly different ideas on something, we did for one of our pieces. This is nothing without you. We like separated into three groups and didn't work together for well, we picked two people we wanted to create something on, and then from there we just split up in like one group worked for 2 months, the other group worked for 2 months, and the last group worked for 2 months, and then we came together at the end and saw how we could try to fit all these things that we created separately into a singular show that had a through line and like all the voices mixed together to say what we wanted to say. So I mean, it was never any difficulty there because I think a lot of us, or I know for me myself, I can say like I didn't want all the responsibility. Uh, so like, how do I get the joy of creating without the fear of what I'm creating? By
Mm-hmm.
knowing that like I have two people that I trust creating this alongside with me, and then that kind of build up this scenario where like I don't care what anyone else thinks about what we make except for the two people right next, like for the people involved. That became the important part. We created something that we felt used our voices effectively, equally, and made some type of world, whether someone enjoyed it or not. Like we took some people somewhere, we were able to say what we all wanted to say, uh, and yeah, we created a community and a group voice and an atmosphere.
Yeah, I acknowledge that it takes a lot of talking. It
Yes.
takes a lot of communicating for us to collaborate. And if you walked into our rehearsal studio, you might be surprised by how much time we're spending sitting and talking compared to what you would think of a dance rehearsal. But that is a priority that we have set because I never wanted to be a choreographer. I just am really excited by the process of melding multiple people's visions into a vision that is more than any of us could have come up with alone. And for that, any amount of communication is worth it. The truest form of democracy to really practice honoring each vision as much as the other and listening to each person as much as the other. In the world at large, this idea of one person at the head of a room or the head of a pyramid or the head of a state calling all the shots, it's becoming old-fashioned and tiresome, and the injustices of that model are loud in our faces all the time. So why not also apply that to a dance studio? It allows us to each be people, not just instruments.
Yeah. And I don't know how it is for musicians, but like for dancers, like both Ingrid and I, having worked in companies where it's one choreographer, it's one voice, it's what they want, yada yada yada. Doing that has led to, and Ingrid can attest to, a lot of negative emotions, because it feels like there isn't. You want to have this dialogue with the people you're working with, but you don't feel like you're allowed to. Or like, I remember one time in a rehearsal that both me and Ingrid were in, we were doing this phrase, and I won't say who the choreographer is, but we were doing this phrase, and he was creating it. And at one point, he kept saying, like, "Oh, like one of the moves in the phrase is like, oh, this is so ugly and dumb. Like, it's gonna be the photo like on the New York Times when it gets reviewed." And he kept saying this over and over again, but he kept doing it. And at one point, I just stopped him and was like, "Then why not just take it out? Like, if you're worried about that, why not just take it out?" But the fact, like, and then he like completely shut down and like didn't say anything, didn't respond, and then like I think it was like 10 seconds, and he just like, "Okay, we'll do it again." And then like that was it, dropped it completely, like nothing. It's like, okay, you're presenting something to us, but when you get a response that might have not have been the response you wanted, you just like ignored and just keep going on as usual. So like that idea that our voice kind of only mattered if it like it pet the ego of the choreographer, or if it like it all yeah, pet the ego of the choreographer, I guess, would just be like the main thing about, like, that's your job. You're there to say like, "Oh, I love doing this. Oh, that's great." Blah. There is no dialogue, there is no conversation. uh, and I think the fact that with HEWMAN we're able to have these conversations with each other and build something, and we all have like, we all can veto. We have that about that power with our conversations and how we build stuff. Like if one of us really doesn't like something, we're like, okay, no, we're not doing it. So it's not like we're creating something that one of us is gonna hate.
Mhm.
uh yeah.
Granted, the three of us, really speak the same language because we have a lot of shared references and shared history from going through school together, which was a long time ago now. So that eases the pathway of our communication. But we also have put ourselves in conversation with other disciplines, which arguably are different languages. So each of our pieces has been a collaboration with something other than dance.
Hmm.
We've worked with a theater director, we have worked with lighting design. So yeah, we're not trying to be too insular in our little three-way happy jive. Yeah, we like to keep expanding the conversation as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
there's never like a finished point with how with where we can discuss something. Like how we go until we kind of run out of time, honestly. And we just like most of our pieces, we don't know what it's going to be until we perform it. So, and that's kind of the joy of it, it can be stressful, but I don't know. The way we built it is, yeah, we create something, we talk about it, and we just see what happens.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. I mean, Lindsay, you said you don't know how it is in music, and I can provide a little bit of a perspective on that. They are a little different languages, but like the relation, it depends on what type of music, of course. You know, in classical music, which is what I can speak for the most, you know, the conductor and the choreographer are kind of the same. The role is the same. But if you're performing a work of, you know, if you're a violinist in a large orchestra and you're performing Beethoven, it's kind of like mostly what the conductor says goes, you know, like, and the conductor is kind of holding together the orchestra. Everyone's watching him. And of course, it depends on the conductor in the same way that it would depend on who the choreographer is, you know. It also depends on your role in the orchestra. If you're the fifth chair, second violinist, maybe you won't be able to really go up to the conductor and be like, hey, in measure 5, like, what if we did this? That's like, nah, you know. If you have a question like, hey, in measure 5, what are you doing here? Like, are you doing, you know, are you in 3 or are you in 2, or how are you conducting that? That's different. That's a question, you know, on like, I need to make sure that I'm doing my job right as fifth chair violinist. So if you need to pass that kind of creative thing on, I guess you would pass that up to the concertmaster, who would then pass that, who's like closer, literally, physically to the conductor, you know, and has a closer relationship. So there is sort of this like, you know, chain of command, so to speak. And whether or not I've never really thought of like, is that aspect of the classical orchestra, is that a good thing? Would it be possible to change that in any way? More so, I've just sort of like rejected the entire establishment and gone and focused on like chamber music, because in chamber music, which is a little more akin to what you three do, it's smaller. You know, you might be working with a composer who's also a conductor, or the composer might have a friend who's a conductor, right? And so they're having a dialogue and they're kind of deciding what's going to work. But at least the way I like to work as a composer is it's all about the musicians. You know, I always like to make sure that the musicians are having fun playing my music. When I'm writing the music, I go, okay, are they going to enjoy playing this, or are they just going to like hate it? And unfortunately, and my friend Abigail and I have talked about this, there's a lot of composers out there who just don't give a shit about the musicians. They don't care. And they also don't really care if the audience is going to like their work at all. And that's like an endemic problem within music, unfortunately. But Ingrid, I liked what you said, and we were talking a little bit about this before the show, about how each discipline has a different language. You and I were talking about how or at least I was talking about how musicians and dancers don't always like have a set unified language on how to agree where things begin and end in a piece. And so when you have to stop in a rehearsal, you know, it's not like, okay, start at measure 13. The dancers might not know what measure 13 is because they've, as you described, called it something else, you know? And so there's like this 5 minutes of, oh, well, it's at this point where we make this motion, and the musicians are like, we don't know where that is, you know. So have you ever worked with an ensemble?
We did it in school.
Mm-hmm.
A few of our performances for our main stages were with live orchestra, but not many. I'm trying to think specifically. I feel like one of our new dances was live music, was it? Am I right when I say that, Ingrid?
Oh, my memory is foggy.
Yeah.
How long?
I'm trying to.
Well,
choreo
Yeah.
comps, the collaboration between third year choreographers and composers from the music division. Those were live performances of musicians and dancers. And I think because the composers were so intimately tied to the process of the choreographer, the composers were in the room for rehearsal, and the composer and the choreographer were constantly talking, and the music was made in tandem with the dance. I think that marriage allowed a new vocabulary to emerge that the choreographer and the dancers and the musicians and the composers shared. So by the time everyone was in rehearsal together, including musicians at the very end of the process, it was pretty seamless in terms of where to start and where to stop and getting on the same page. And that's the same experience that we had. Our last piece, as Lindsay mentioned, it was called This Is Nothing Without You, which was a direct address to the audience. But we worked in collaboration with a composer who's a percussionist, the awesome Andrew Funchin, who was a classmate at school as well. And he was in the room writing in his notebook as we were rehearsing. So we named entire sections together, and we had shared references and collected names that we were all going with. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's completely fair. I think the composer in those instances was probably bending more to the dancers than the dancers to the musician, because we didn't speak in measures or weren't looking at the score in front of us. But there was certainly a meeting in some middle point.
The only thing I can think of about dancing with live musicians, because sometimes they weren't always there, but I do remember the only thing that was a problem was sometimes they would up the tempo, so you'd be having to do the dance 2 times faster than it was originally choreographed as. So, and then you'd have to so then we'd get to someplace early, and it would just cause this whole just build up and crash of just what the piece was. So we'd have to stop and be the tempo was a little too fast on this part. At the beginning of section 1, I think that's how they kind of bridged the gap between how the choreographer would talk about and how the musicians would talk about it, because dancers name sections very weird things. I'm trying to think of what weird things we've called, or we had a section called Daffy Duck. We and unless a musician was there helping build it and saw its creation, they would have no idea what that was. So they'd be oh, beginning of section 1, yada yada yada. That's all I can really think of in terms of that. Oh God, can you hear my dogs?
Oh, vaguely.
Okay.
Yeah, musicians, at least down here, a lot of the musicians who are working musicians they have that opinion of, well, I'm a professional working musician, and they're just there to do their job, really, and so they don't care. They're just worried about, they just want to execute their execution. They just want to play their notes right, hit the right notes, make the conductor happy, right, and get paid. And so they just need to know where to start, So and I'm saying this because, Ingrid, you were I don't know if it was really fair to the musicians, and I'm going to tell you, they probably didn't care. They probably were just hey, wherever you want to start, well, okay, cool, here we go, 1, 2, 3, So I like to say that we're mostly pretty flexible, although I know some musicians who are not, but yeah.
Also, mm-hmm. I have to say, all due respect and credit to performers who do excel in the more traditional structured environments of a ballet company or an orchestra. Of course, out of limitation comes creativity, right? And the amount of flexibility and skill that these people have that choose that environment, I applaud to no end. But if you are experiencing discomfort there, you can make another choice, which is what Lindsay and I have often done.
Yeah, because I don't know if we said this in the interview already, but Ingrid, you were a performer at the Met. Mm-hmm. For how long?
I did 2 operas over the course of a year.
Wow.
So bridging a summer season and a winter season.
Mm-hmm. What were those 2 operas? Just curious.
One of them was Prince Igor, mm-hmm. and one of them was Eugene Onegin. And that was a prime example of being a puzzle piece in an elaborate colossally
Yeah.
enormous moving machine.
Yeah.
And it was exhilarating for that reason, and to have a taste of that. Yeah.
Because I've heard when I was working at the Dallas Opera, the technical director told me the Met is basically a 24/7 operation. Like at 1 a.m. another crew will come on and keep doing stuff, and then they do it in shifts. Is that true?
It's true.
Wow.
It's phenomenal.
They have like they usually have 2 shows going on at the same time, don't they, Ingrid?
Yeah,
Like
because
2 separate.
they have the stage production, but backstage they have room for the entire set and cast of a whole nother production, so they can be rehearsing one while the other is in shows. And also because opera singers are particular about needing days in between their shows, they need to be able to roll one whole production off to the side, roll another in, and then be able to roll the previous one back 3 nights later. So it is 24 hours, and my favorite anecdote is that when you're in the audience and you look at the Met stage, what do I say? Oh no, I'm losing my grip. What did I always say?
Apparently you didn't say it enough.
Like the house is massive and it seems to dwarf the stage. But from the other perspective, the stage is massive and it dwarfs the house.
Yeah.
So everything is big. That's
exactly how I felt the first time I looked at the Windspear Opera House in Dallas, because I'd been backstage the whole time. I was actually performing there as part of a performance in undergrad, and I'd been backstage the whole time exploring all the big open spaces. And I walked out of the house and I was like, "Whoa!" Like you would never be able to tell that all that's back there. Like that's really impressive. And yeah, and then I ended up working there for a year after undergrad, and it's funny because it still feels like home, and I haven't worked there in like 2 years now. But yeah, I mean, you said it's exhilarating to be a part of such a large machine. It is exhilarating, and then it's also like soul destroying because you're you're one person in a huge just machine of things. But yeah, that absolutely lines up. In all of your biographies, you've mentioned that you've done a lot of teaching. Each one of you is there a culture of I don't know how to ask this. Is the culture of teaching sort of a strong force in the world of dance? Like as a dancer, you will inevitably be teaching dance to someone else at some point in your career?
No, there are some really
Really?
bad teachers. Yep. I mean, there's some dancers that are very inexperienced when it comes to conveying what they want and like what they're trying to attain when they teach. And that's like, if you can be the most amazing dancer and just be able to do all these things, but if you can't explain it to someone, then you're kind of at a loss. Like if you can't verbalize a feeling or a way to approach it that isn't just like muscle memory, then you're kind of at a loss. Because I guess the way we teach very cerebral and discussion and feeling based, and if you can't vocalize any of that, you don't really have anything, unless you're teaching ballet. Then you can be like, that's all very position and specifics.
Yeah.
Conventionally, there's kind of a stereotype that all dancers will teach someday, because everyone knows that a dancer's career ends earlier than most. Your body can't go on for that long, and they're like, so what are you going to do next? But it's not a choice that everyone makes necessarily. I would say a lot of our peers do end up teaching in the pattern of wearing all the hats, like we've all already mentioned. Like being a dancer isn't being one thing, and you're teaching one week, performing the next, making the next, constantly switching. And most people like to be ready to take up that baton if they need to, but there are no rules.
Yeah. And I think there are also some of the people that don't want to teach because of the idea like, oh, you'll just end up teaching anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's like some people try to fight that whole mindset.
We have that in music quite a lot, especially down here in Texas, where there is a massive music education machine that most of the public colleges and even some of the private colleges, music colleges in Texas, are basically just churning out music teachers. And that's all. And being the son of two professional music teachers who were also professional performers, I've always rejected that notion. I've always been and I was taught to reject that notion of just like, don't engage with that at all. I was glad that I got to do a little bit of teaching in sort of the locus that I wanted to, but I didn't have to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that seems to be an almost universal constant in theater, in dance, in music, of you're either like performing or you're teaching, and some people are able to do both, and that's really great.
Mhm.
I have another question here. Would you say that the three of you are heavily influenced by science fiction in your choreography? I kind of got this sci-fi vibe and some mention of science fiction from some of the projects that I was researching that you guys did.
Not
really
necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily. If I
Uh-huh.
think about it, no. I think, well, I guess one of them you could kind of infer that from it. Once we're lit, we kind of created this very otherworldly environment, which I could say bridged on sci-fi. But we try to keep it real, but abstract. So it's all abstractions of like real day interactions and feelings and concepts. So I wouldn't say anything. It's like if I said, "Oh, I love this sci-fi book or movie or fiction," I don't think any of that has ever happened.
No, I'm wondering actually if you may have seen something. I work with another collaborator completely unrelated to HEWMAN under the moniker Welcome to Campfire, and we make
Yes.
sci-fi dance plays.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's present in that situation, but not HEWMAN.
That's okay. That's where I'm getting it from. Yeah, I actually I was wondering if I could talk about that with you really briefly. That's Tony Bordenaro, your collaborator in Welcome to Campfire, right?
Yes, Tony. I mean, Lindsay, do you mind if this gets mentioned?
No, not at all.
Yes.
You got a film coming out soon.
Yes, we do. Tony and I managed to enter each other's quarantine bubble in a way that was just not really conceivable for the three-way human network. Jason being in Brooklyn, us all being in our own coping systems. But because Lindsay and I were able to rehearse a little bit, we staged a version of our most recent evening length dance play that we presented in January, right before COVID, in shortened adaptations outside and in an art gallery and other iterations that fit within COVID protocol. And we were able to film one of them and turn the piece into something. It's not just archival footage, it's actually meant to be viewed on screen. So that's coming out on April 22nd. It's called The Pigeon and the Mouse, the film.
That's great. Yeah, I did a little bit of looking into that, and I can't wait to watch that myself. How can people? Part of what we do here at Open Parameters, we help other artists plug work that they're doing, and so how can people view The Pigeon and the Mouse?
Thank you for asking. We have a website called welcometocampfire.com. And one of the tabs on there is virtual event. And it has the trailer and ticket info all on that page. So if you're curious, the story actually completely unwittingly, we made it in 2020, is about two people quarantining together from an unsafe world outside. And we had
Whoa.
masks as props in our final scene. By coincidence, little did we know, 6 months later, we wouldn't be able to perform the piece. We wouldn't be able to perform the piece unless we wore those masks for safety reasons. So it's been a wild ride with that piece, and it's now on film.
Wow, and that concept of two people having to quarantine and shield themselves, you developed that concept completely independently before COVID started.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. That's really creepy, actually. In a good,
Yeah.
That's in a good way. It's creepy.
I swear it's not our fault.
No, certainly not. No, certainly not. I mean, art as a harbinger for things to come, that's impactful in my opinion. That's really interesting. Wow.
I choose to blame you too.
Lindsay saw the premiere. He knows.
I have. I did. Well, I didn't see the premiere. I saw. Well, I guess I did see the premiere. Never mind.
Yeah, I mean in January.
Yeah. Oh, January.
2 Januaries ago.
That
Wow.
seems like forever.
Yeah, we've all passed through a lot of lifetimes since then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it simultaneously feels like it's been a long time, and that it's also been just like yesterday that we were living our lives normally and doing our thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Ingrid, Lindsay, it's just been absolutely joyous to talk to both of you this past hour. I was super excited to talk to you for the last few weeks when you agreed to come do this, and it's just been great meeting the two of you and talking about everything. So I hope to see you again, and I hope that you both stay well and continue to do art and dance.
We will. HEWMAN will be back someday. We don't know when, but we hope to get something back in the works soon.
Yes. And Jason sends his best, our third man, and married with all that you have on your horizon with Open Parameter.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you to the hacker that brought us together.
Yeah, exactly. Thank that person.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting us on.
Absolutely. It was great to have you here. Thanks for listening to this episode of Open Parameter Podcast. Go check out our other projects like Open Parameter Ensemble and Open Parameter Hub at openparameter.net. Join our growing community of artists and patrons and help us fund those projects by becoming a supporting member at openparameter.net/support. Your generous donations will allow us to commission composers to write new music, commission artists to make new works of art, and provide paid performance opportunities for local North Texas musicians. Open Parameter is a sponsored project of Fractured Atlas, a nonprofit arts service organization. Contributions for the charitable purposes of Open Parameter must be made payable to Fractured Atlas only and are tax deductible to the extent permitted by law. Help support our community of artists and musicians today by going to openparameter.net/support and clicking on Donate Now. I'm Del Cook, Creative Director of Open Parameter. Abby Hawthorne is our music consultant and writer, Hannah Hughes is our graphic designer, and Stajara Danilescu is our visual and interactive media consultant. From all four of us here at Open Parameter, thank you so much for listening today. Please tune in again next week.